the Secrets, where we explore the connecting links between the pernicious deeds of a group of secret society outlaws who are creating a tightly controlled world society with them as bosses and you and I as slaves to their system, popularly known as the New World Order. Research indicates that most of the unexplained craft we see in our skies are from somewhere on or inside our planet. This led to research of the Hollow Earth and subterranean theories in the 1980s and 90s, which in turn led to the realization that the answers we seek are in the control of a number of elitist groups and secret societies that we call collectively the Controllers. Even a quick look at recent world events should convince anyone that the Controllers' plan is working very well. It is these things we explore on this radio show. Join us as we work towards unraveling the secrets.
Greetings once again, and welcome to Unraveling the Secrets at a new time with fabulous new hosts. Join us for our second week as we jaunt around the universe. This is Timothy Green Beckley, Mr. UFO. On the Manhattan side of the Hudson and across the river in Jersey City, we have Carla Anderson representing the cutting edge of the paranormal. Happy Valentine's Day, Carla.
Hello, happy Valentine's Day, Tim.
Well,
very
here we
groovy.
are. Yeah. Did you do anything special on Valentine's Day?
Oh, I worked today. Then I had some dinner, and then I took a nap, and here I am. This is what I'm doing special. This is my special thing.
I'm glad we're all around the campfire, the UFO and paranormal campfire.
Yes.
And down in Miami, very chic Miami, we have the custodian of the airways, the Jackal, Angel Espino, CEO of the PSN Radio Network. And I feel like singing a chorus of Moon Over Miami, Shine On My Love and Me, so we can stroll beside the roll of the rolling sea. Angel, welcome.
Thank you, sir. It's a pleasure to be on again with Mr. UFO and Carla.
Yeah.
And we have one heck of a show this evening. We're going to first be talking to our friend, our new friend actually, Laurie McDonald, who is an abduction therapist. And we're going to find out exactly how her work differs from that of the late Bud Hopkins and hear some of her case histories. The abduction phenomena, of course, is a rather controversial part of the whole UFO package. There are many people. I don't know, Angel, how many people now, supposedly, according to a poll, say that they've been abducted by extraterrestrials? It's a insurmountable amount of people,
abducted,
right?
Or they believe in the existence of extraterrestrials?
No, abducted. I think even if there's 1% of the population, it's a huge figure of people who maintain that they've actually been absconded, they're taken up, probed and pattered, and God knows what. Now, Laurie, though, is not just an abduction therapist, but she also is involved with the contactees. So, contactees usually have a pattern of beneficial enlightenment from their extraterrestrial friends, while people like Betty Hill would have been a hardcore abductee, one of the first, of course, and usually their experiences turn out to be fairly negative. So we're going to hear all sides of the controversy this evening from Laurie, and then later on in the show, we're going to have the host of the History Channel's Hangar One program, John Ventre, who's involved with the investigation for MUFON. He's a state director from Pennsylvania. Cool. So we've got quite a show going.
Sounds like it. Sounds good.
That's a great guest, John Ventre. Good show, too, Hangar One.
So I think, at this point, maybe we should have a break, or should we just bring Laurie right on?
Well, that was pretty quick. Weren't you going to do 10 minutes?
Well, let's give the guests the time. Less chatter, and more interviewing. This evening, we're going to unravel a lot of secrets, or as many as we can, actually. All right, we're back here on Unraveling These Secrets, and our first guest is someone I'm very anxious to speak with. I really don't know too much about her work, and I'm impatient to find out what it is that she exactly does. Laurie McDonald is a graduate of the Dale Carnegie Effective Speaking and Human Relations and a graduate of the Hypnotherapy Institute. Now, why don't you give us a little background? Because, like I say, I really don't know too much about you. I met you on Facebook recently, and it seemed, here's, with the passing of Bud Hopkins, there's been sort of a vacuum, an empty vacuum in the abduction field. Why don't you give us a little bit about your background, what it is you do, and how you differ from what the work that Bud Hopkins was involved in?
I am a certified clinical hypnotherapist. I own a private practice, True You Hypnotherapy, here in Sacramento. I'm the founder and the organizer of the Sacramento Alien Abduction and Contactee Support Group. We have 70 plus members who meet once a month to discuss either their abduction experience or their contactee experience. We try to shed a little light on the subject. I'm on the mental health referral list for MUFON, as well as Opus, and the new organization Free, which is really moving ahead strongly. They have an amazing advisory board. They have Kathleen Martin, Mary Rodwell, Whitley Strieber, Rudy Shield, the astrophysicist, I believe Edgar Mitchell, the former Apollo 14 astronaut, and they're putting together something completely new in ufology. They're compiling reports with all of these interdisciplinary and scientific reports where we can get all of these views to really see exactly what's going on. In my practice, I see people who have been abducted by extraterrestrials. Some claim interaction with other entities such as gray, zeta, or reptilian entities. These encounters are often unpleasant when it falls under the category of abduction, because by the very name, it's against one's will. So there's certainly a lot going on there, and I've recently put together 5 distinct categories of abduction, what we can expect, what we can anticipate from that particular type of event. I'm also trying to put together the psyche of the extraterrestrial involved. Say you find yourself face to face, eye to eye with a gray alien. It would be good to know what to anticipate, so you know how to react so that you can control the situation to the best of your ability, such as the mantis, the insight into their psyche, which is very strange. So all of it, hopefully helping people get more insight and a better understanding of what's happening, and hopefully advancing it into some type of a consciousness expansion for them so that they can really use it to possibly fulfill their human potential, whatever that may be.
And now, how would you say that this differs from like the work of Bud Hopkins and other researchers in the field?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think my work differs. One, I run a huge support group where we have 20, 25 or plus people meeting at once, discussing the phenomena from different angles. He did one-on-one research. I do that as well. But I'm able to take it to the next step and then the next step. Of course, with the abduction phenomena, the next logical step, of course, is the hybrid program. They're said to have been having genetics just extracted, either ovum or semen or both, depending on who's being abducted. And what are they doing with it? Creating some type of hybrid human-alien child for possible integration into our own society. There would certainly be major ramifications if something like that were to happen in our medical industry, infrastructure. Everything would be affected. But what I'm looking at is how it affects one's consciousness. I think it's not even so much what extraterrestrial they saw or encountered, or even what UFO they saw, what type of ship, whether it's a UFO or an AVC, whether it's cigar-shaped or dome-shaped. It's not important. I think what's more important is the fact that they had the experience and the reality has changed. Now, the reality has expanded to believe in the unseen or unbelievable. So they are no longer the same. Their core belief system has adjusted to accept the phenomena. The next step after that is what we do with that as far as our consciousness goes. And I think that's where we see a lot of the contactees, where they're beyond the abduction phenomena, but they have contact with entities in much deeper space, beyond a frequency band, more into very deep space. And these entities are supposedly very altruistic, very advanced. They don't require a body. They're basically a consciousness or an energetic entity, because the contactees that report having interaction with them report them as having a specific color silhouette, not features so much, just a silhouette.
So, can I just ask a question?
Absolutely.
So these 25 people or so that come together in your meetings, they have been abducted, or they're contactees or abductees.
Yeah,
the 25 that come together, and they're trying to get a deeper meaning. Like, they're trying to not be so freaked out because they've been abducted, and try to understand what is it that, because are they getting contacted over and over again?
Right. Within the different categories of contact, you see some have 2 to 5 experiences. Some are channelers who have an extraterrestrial speak through them. Others are victims of the abduction phenomena. And other people have very pleasant interaction where they feel either mission or some type of agenda oriented, where they're collecting information and interacting with the extraterrestrial, saying that they believe they have an agreement to do so on some type of a soul level.
That they would have. I'm sure that it affected the way they feel about their religious beliefs too, I would think.
Right. I mean, depending on the person's belief system, the filter that they see things through will be religious if they were raised that way, or more spiritual. But still, even religion has a number of references to extraterrestrials or craft.
I would think they would lose their religion, really, if they saw something like this. I mean, does it,
It makes the question. It absolutely, and this is where our reality and our consciousness begins to change and expand. We must question what's happening and how it affects us, and what our past really means. I mean, and then all of the big philosophical questions, start to rise into your consciousness, such as, what are we, why are we here, so on and so forth. The very big ones.
And what's the government doing? That we're going through this all by ourselves too. What's going on there?
I heard, speaking earlier, the fact is that what's currently reported in the abduction phenomena is 280 million people have reported that worldwide. That's based on a 4% value system. That number is, I believe, quite low, because even in the group that I run, I say there's over 70 members. I can only see 20 or 25 at a time in a support group. Otherwise, it's just too many to handle. Mm-hmm. Nobody gets a fair chance to speak. But I asked several times how many here reported their experience. And I think out of 70, I had 2 people.
Mm-hmm. Well, who would you report it to outside of you or Bud Hopkins?
To MUFON or to Opus or to an organization that collects us, ICAR. They've done an amazing job. They've done blood samples because we're looking at, we see that not only in the abduction phenomena, but contactees are generational. It goes back many generations in the family. And so we have to look now at blood type and DNA.
Well, now, how do these people find you?
Well, I run the Experiencers group in 2013 at San Jose UFO Con. I'm doing it again this March 27th in San Jose UFO Con. I'm online. I do as much public speaking regarding it, because really believe that people have the right to be able to speak freely about their experience without the ridicule, without people telling them that they're crazy. They're already having to question their own sanity after going through this, unless, of course, they're a lifelong experiencer and they've psychologically adapted to this and accepted it as part of their own reality from a very early age. So it is in their belief system.
Well, now run it through to us. If somebody comes to you, how do you know that they've had an actual experience, that they're just not either making it up, or that they're hallucinating it, or are just not balanced correctly, whatever the word is? Yes.
Sure, somebody's hearing voices, you're ruling out such things as auditory hallucinations and schizophrenia, perhaps even demonic possession. There's a number of things.
What do you think demonic possession is?
Just exactly what it says.
So do you believe in the paranormal as well?
Well, I think that the two subjects definitely bleed together. It seems to me that once that part of our consciousness is open to accepting the unseen, or we begin to investigate it, I think as soon as we start to take steps in that area, we grow in that area. So people who have had extraterrestrial experiences increase things like psychism. They'll see a ghost or some other type of apparition. There's one woman in the group who does paranormal research and work, and she has probably some of the most spectacular EVPs I've ever heard. And they're not like words here and there. They're full-on scary sentences. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, based on many things, such as the Drake equation for the existence of life on other planets, and the fact that I've personally have had an out-of-body experience. I know that we can exist and live and have full consciousness outside the body. So, yeah, I believe that there's certainly a whole lot more than what meets the eye. But then again, I'm aware of the definition of the word human, hu being the ancient definition, and modern days we use it to describe the intensity of light. So it's a measurement of light, and man being short for manifestation. A human is a light embodied entity. And with that reality, we have the option to really move and expand the mind into multiple realities and dimensions by very definition of what we are composed of.
How did you get involved in this?
Mm-hmm. I went to the Alchemical Hypnotherapy Institute of Sacramento to become a master hypnotist, and then transferred to Santa Fe, where I went to become a clinical hypnotherapist. And in order to pass these tests, I had to do a regression in front of a panel for the ACHE, which is the American Council for Hypnotherapy Examiners. Made sure I can regress somebody to the different levels of consciousness and then bring them back up safely. And so in doing so, the subject came to me for hidden creativity and changed during the regression to seeing a UFO, being with his brother, having it land, having the entities come out. And then when I asked him to describe what entity he was seeing, in front of me, a like softball size sphere of light appeared above his head and just scanned down his body and disappeared relatively quickly. I looked over my shoulder at the judges, who indicated to me to continue, and their like jaws were wide open. And I tried to continue with the UFO stuff, and it seemed like his memory was just gone. And he went back to his original session. I finished it, brought him back up, and who wouldn't be intrigued?
Yeah.
So you had an experience right there. Was that the first, or had in your own private life, had you had other experiences?
No, I actually have had other experiences. As a young child, I definitely saw the very beautiful violet-colored silhouette ones that people refer to as celestial entities, which exist above the frequency band where extraterrestrial, there's a bit of a hierarchy. It's sort of like subterranean, then terrestrial, extraterrestrial, celestial. And so depending on the type of entity was what they live in. So the ones that appear just in energetic colors like that, I saw from a relatively early age. Didn't think anything of it.
They were actually, were entities?
Yeah, I could hear them speak in what was a extraordinarily lovely, high frequency, feminine voice. And yeah, absolutely. So thought that that was rather normal.
So now, how when I think of abductions, I think of Betty Hill. Now, her experience was in the 1960s. That
Right.
seems to have been the first abduction, certainly the first one that got any public attention. How come the earlier contactees seem to have a different approach to all of this? Most of their experiences were very positive. They told about meeting the Space Brothers and being given cosmic wisdom of one kind or another. And then later on, the experiences with Travis Walton, Betty Hill, and all these other abductees became much more frightening in nature. Why the flip as far as these encounters and experiences go?
Different entities. I mean, the indigenous people of the Americas spoke of star people who brought them information and help in such things as agriculture and natural medicine. And they were considered very good, but simultaneously in other parts of the world, people spoke of what was called the jinn, and they were considered some type of a extraterrestrial or demon. I mean, in fact, when it's translated in Palestine, they say it's like an extraterrestrial demon. And they report very similar things where the body becomes paralyzed, they're unable to move, they sense the entities in the room, and then at the same time sense other entities in the room. And those similarities have not changed in the abduction part. Now, the contact part, that's a different category. I mean, when you're one-on-one interaction, like many indigenous peoples as well, even Charles Hall back in the 60s claimed that the tall whites were on the Indian Springs reservation, or not reservation, but a military base. They had their own barracks and actually had families, a playground where their children lived in, and they were an extraterrestrial entity that looks rather similar to a human and can slightly disguise themselves to blend in. They gave good information, but were not exactly, altruistic. It depends on the entity. People have reptiles. Those interactions with reptoids are quite frightening.
I'm not sure it's not all mixed up, though. When we talk about paranormal or we talk about the extraterrestrial, because I just kind of feel like because you're going between these two different planes, that you don't need a body. Like everything that's described like that just sounds like maybe that was, the origin of what people call demons and angels and all this. So I mean, I'm not so sure it's not all wrapped up.
Well, I agree. I mean, we see
spheres of light,
Yeah, it's the terminology that the people use at the time. I mean, and it does bleed in. And then, yeah, absolutely. Then there's your whole interdimensional beings that people talk about, and they come through dimensionally, which is different than extraterrestrially. One is parallel, one is horizontal. Parallel is the dimension aspect. And these are different entities. We hear people talk about them as shadow people or the Hat Man, so on and so forth. And that definitely is more paranormal.
Yeah, I've kind of put these all under the category of alter terrestrials because we don't really know where they're. I mean, just because an entity, I'm sure you found this out too. Just because an entity tells you that they're from somewhere or they're here to do a specific job, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. In the early contactee experiences and the people who claimed that they had face-to-face encounters, they said these beings were coming from Venus and Mars and had civilizations on Saturn. Well, we know in the physical sense that this is an impossibility. So the UFO beings sometimes can be tricksters. They tell you what they want you to believe, not what is necessarily the truth.
I absolutely agree with that. I see that all the time. There's a huge type of manipulation in that phenomena, and we have to be very careful. I mean, really, you hear a voice, we need to know where that's coming from. As much research as possible, the large amount of people that it's affecting. I mean, people who are exploring and researching the paranormal, they're getting quite a lot of information too, but we need to see something like basically the next step. How do we interact at will?
Or now, if these beings do have a program, and did you say, or I know I've heard it said that there are 70 races of beings coming here? Well, that to my way of thinking seems a little bit off the wall, should I say? Because, I mean, there's no way of proving that. A lot of these entities, outside of the ones that are human-looking and the tall whites that Carla knows about, because she thinks one of them came into her hair salon, Balance in Jersey City.
They do that. That would be something a hybrid or a tall white would do, just to have the experience so they learn how to integrate into our society better. But go on, sorry.
Go on, Tim.
Yeah. Well, so now what is the outcome of all of this? Where are we going to head with this?
Exactly.
All right. Let's take a little break here for a moment, okay? And then we'll come back with with some more of this very titillating conversation. We're back with Laurie McDonald, and on the other side of the Hudson River in Jersey City, balancing us all out is Carla Anderson.
Hello, Carla Anderson.
And down in Miami is the Jackal, who's keeping this all organized. Okay, Laurie, we have another...
It would have been funny if you would have said afloat, because I came on a boat to this country. So
Did you come on a boat?
I did. I'm Cuban.
So you came on a boat?
Yeah.
Automatically, you come on a boat if you're from Cuba?
You have to, especially if you came into the 1980 Mario boat lift. That's how I came into this country.
Oh, well, hello.
So I came into this country on a boat.
Great.
And we're
so it would have been funny.
And we're all going to leave on a spaceship, according to Laurie. So.
That's my wish. That's my dream.
I didn't say that.
Okay. Are we going to be lifted up? Is there some end times prophecy coming here?
No, I don't believe so. I do believe, though, that there is a bit of evolution happening, as it should. I think
so it's a mental thing instead of an actual... It's a mental liftoff instead of a physical liftoff.
I'm not saying that it can't be a physical liftoff as well, Tim. I mean...
I think it could be a purge myself.
Right.
Like over time, like we've been purged several times, and then then Earth has come back, to something else, and then to something else, and I think it's coming toward a purge.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely possible, but it's never ended times. It only ended those times.
Times, and then it went on to a new time.
That's right, and hopefully each and every one was a little bit better in some way. I mean, I do like to look back at history in broad strokes to see if fundamentally people have changed, that they have been able to rise up to be fully human and kinder, more aware. And I hope that we are moving in that direction.
Well, I mean, I think that 6,000 years ago, we probably had a lot of knowledge already, and yet 200 years ago, we're walking around in the dark, in pilgrim times. I think it's weird that you find, in the old drawings and all this, all the ancient drawings, that it looks like we had all kinds of technology back then.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, we were brought back to a place where we're, trying to rub two sticks together again.
Well, because whenever we become very technically advanced, instead of using that technology for the betterment of mankind, it's turned into a weapon, such as Tesla's scalar waves and every other type of psychotronic, radionic, mind control device that they use. And instead of using that to perpetuate the betterment, they use it to control people to a negative. That's our problem. We're still not doing it for the betterment.
I think that's true. I think that's true. I think every once in a while, we have all this knowledge, then we blow ourselves up somehow. Right. Somehow we get purged. We purge ourselves. Then we have to start all over again, and we're working it out. It's really, now that you mention it, it's strange.
Well,
yeah, I think that's what it is.
Ladies, the time is clicking away here. But Laurie, why don't you tell? Why don't you? Yes, that's correct. Yeah. Why don't you tell us a couple of brief examples of the type of experiences that are reported to you? Maybe one abduction and one contact.
Well, what's very common in the abduction, and I see the same type of case over and over again, are women who come to me and they say that they've had eggs taken from them from extraterrestrials, that they're absolutely terrified. That later they're brought on to what they believe is a craft or to some facility. They don't always know for sure. And a extraterrestrial human child is put into their arms. Some women are very repulsed, but they keep getting this message from usually it's a gray alien, telling them, to nurture and help out the child. One woman, that I'm dealing with, the child didn't survive. And she suffered another set of trauma on there, felt it as if she had lost her own baby. I mean, we call that post-abduction stress disorder, and people need help after this. But this is what's happening. Women now are saying, okay, I'm past the abduction part. I'm healed from that. I want my baby back. What are we going to do with that? Those are half human children, and they have a very strong maternal instinct, and they feel that their human rights were violated, and they most certainly are correct about that. So that's pretty typical. As far as contact goes, it falls into multiple categories, but what I see is people who have contact who believe that they are agenda-oriented, that they're here monitoring and compiling information on humanity. Or let's just kind of see if we are misusing that technology that we have. They report things like our balance in our ecosystem, our ecologies, our levels of pollution, and they say that they have interaction. And I have a handful of people that I'm working with who say that. And for some, it's really difficult. They don't want to be subjected to this type of information. They don't want to know about it. The others do.
And so what is the ultimate outcome of this? I mean, is there going to be a day of disclosure? I mean, not in the sense of that we have disclosure like they're talking about in a political sense that Obama's going to get on TV and say, hey, there are aliens here. But is there going to be some ultimate time when this will be known to everyone, not just the 4 or 5% of the people that have had these experiences?
Well, remember that 4 or 5% of the people is hundreds of millions of people. And that's a very large number. And will we have disclosure? Well, the only lobbyist in the United States of America is Stephen Bassett. And he's been pushing for that, and they've done up already a mock congressional hearing, and petitions are going around, signatures are being collected globally. The UN is having a meeting to discuss the extraterrestrial presence on the planet. Huge countries like Brazil, 12 other countries have put all of their UFO information together, and they're actually working with their air forces and UFO researchers to see where this is going. Disclosure will come. Maybe this year, maybe not. I don't think that it's political suicide. But for those people who have experienced it, they don't need proof. And they certainly don't need some 4 or 8 term temporary position of authority to tell them that this is real, because it's real to them, and so they don't have to rely on that external source.
Well, people do. You're absolutely 100% correct about this. I've always said that people have had these experiences. People who are knowledgeable about the subject, you don't really need to tell them what's real and what isn't. All right, well, Laurie, you've made a lot of sense tonight, and I'm happy that we did get together and discuss this, and we'll have to do it again in the future. Why don't you tell our audience there how they can get in touch with you, and have you written any books on the subject? Or
I'm currently writing a book right now entitled The Extraterrestrial Interference. They can get a hold of me through my website, www.truehypnotherapy.com, or come out to UFO Con in San Jose, March 27th. I'm on the abduction panel there, and then the following Sunday, free of charge, I'll be running an experiencers group. If you have an experience, you've encountered something, and you want an opportunity to finally speak about it in a non-judgmental forum, that's your opportunity.
Well, you certainly are the person to go see about this, and let's keep in contact, and I certainly want to see how this plays out in the future, because no doubt other people will be having some pretty strange experiences. And so, Laurie, thank you for being on, and we'll continue in just a few minutes with John Ventre.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thanks. It's been my pleasure.
Hey, we are back on the air, and this is Unraveling the Secrets, and we've unraveled a few already tonight, and we're going to unravel even more with our next guest, John Ventre. Now, I watched John Ventre on TV last night for several hours, because he is the host on History Channel 2 of Hangar 1. And so we've got a lot of questions to ask. And John is the state director for the Mutual UFO Network from the state of Pennsylvania. He's written for a lot of magazines on the subject. He's written several books that we're going to learn about, and he's got a great background in this. John, why don't you just give us a little bit of a scoop on what it is you do and how you got involved in all of this? Because as far as I know, you're compared to me, at least, a relatively newcomer. I guess your interest goes back to the flap in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh?
Well, actually, the way I got started in this was back in 1996. I actually had no interest in UFOs. You know, I was almost 40 years old, and I decided I wanted to write a book, a sci-fi book, on end time prophecy, the Mayan calendar. So as I started investigating end time prophecies and other cultures, I kept coming across these other cultures talking about star people, flying shields, people from the stars. So I said, you know what, I'm going to look into UFOs. So I really didn't get involved in UFOs until 1998 when I joined MUFON. So it's been 17 years, just about 17 years now. But that's how I got started, really, was researching end-time prophecy in the Mayan calendar.
So you obviously see that there's a connection between UFOs and star people in a lot of these prophecies and even biblical matters. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. You can't, I don't know how you look at the ancient history and not realize that somebody was there helping us. I don't know how much.
Or maybe hindering us.
Oh, either way, yeah, holding us back and making us slaves to build their temples. But yeah, it definitely seemed to me that
mine for their gold, or
mining the gold also. Yeah,
the technology though too.
Hello? Yeah.
Hi, John.
Yeah, so that's how you doing? So yeah, so that's how I got involved in this, and it's really the first big flap we had in Pennsylvania was that Bucks County flap in 2008, and so that's really how I got involved with ufology.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about that flap? I know it's a part of the is it the Discovery Channel's UFOs Over Earth?
Yeah, it's funny. It's been on the Discovery Channel a couple of times. I've done 3 different shows for Discovery on Destination America, Discovery Science, and Discovery with the Bucks County. We haven't done a History Channel show yet on that on Hangar 1, but I'm sure we'll get to it. But it was an interesting. It was like really started around April of 2008. And went through the summer, and I was getting these phone calls from people up in Eastlake, Ohio, and they were telling me, well, they see these lights coming in from Lake Erie, and next thing you know, I'll get a sighting reported to MUFON or a phone call telling me that they see them coming in from the lake over Wheeling, West Virginia, then over Pittsburgh, then we were getting them over State College, then heading across the state over Bucks County. So, in some instances, it almost seemed like it was the same UFO that was reported, and, 10, 15 minutes later, it was 300 miles, away. So, so we had some really good cases. Although it started out of Lake Erie and in Pittsburgh, the bulk of the cases occurred in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And, we went from getting 97 cases a year for the entire state, and then all of a sudden in that 10-week period over the summer, we got about 250 cases. So, that's why I call it a flap, because the amount of cases we got nearly tripled in a 2.5-month period. But 2 of the cases in particular were very good. One was happened in Levittown. This woman by the name of Denise, her dog's barking and wakes her up. She goes to her window, sliding glass door. She goes outside, and it was 3 or 4 occasions she saw this triangular craft in the sky. And on one occasion, it dropped these metallic probes or sprinkles into her tree. So what we did was we took samples of the leaves, then we took control samples from other trees in the yard and around the corner, down the street, and only the ones in her yard turned out that they had boron on the leaves. And boron doesn't reflect radar, which is kind of interesting. They use it in stealth aircraft, they use it in paints, in nuclear reactors. But so when she said something happened in her tree, something did happen, because there were high levels of boron. One of the other lab tests showed that the leaves were subject to high heat or radiation. They showed kind of a burning on them, like lasers were used on them. And
how long did her sighting last, and how low down was the object? I mean, was it right over the trees?
Yeah, I'd say it was maybe in the area of 500 feet high was the UFO, 300 to 500 feet. And, that lasted for about 15 minutes or so. And, that case actually got me on the Anderson Cooper show. So I don't know how many people in this field have been on Anderson Cooper, but I was in April of 2012, and we went into that case. And that in itself was an interesting experience, because it was a pre-taped show. And Joe Nickel was the skeptic that was on. And, it was funny that a lot of the answers I gave were edited out when the show aired 10 days later. They left in basically everything that Joe Nichols said. But, on everything Joe said, Anderson would say to me, John, what do you got to say? And I gave some good answers, and they cut out what I said about, we got into other cases, and I was talking about the O'Hare case, and, Joe said it was a hole punch cloud, and I said, well, that's not possible because it was 53 degrees that day, and it has to be freezing temperatures to have a hole punch cloud. Well, they cut that out. And there was one point I said something, the whole audience applauded because I said something about the 3 female witnesses we had there. They cut that out. There was one point where Joe Nichols said, well, these women saw the planet Jupiter, and the whole audience broke out laughing. They dubbed out the laughter. I mean, it was so obvious they didn't want the UFO topic to look credible. And, one thing I did say on that show, because I had just read it in Wired magazine, was, Anderson said the government can't keep secrets, et cetera, et cetera. And, I gave some examples of the Manhattan Project, the stealth fighter. And then, I said something about the NSA is recording every email, every cell phone call, every text, everything. And he kind of shrugged it off like, no, they're not. And that story didn't break until a year later it was like the spring of 2013. But I've got it documented in April of 12 on the Anderson Cooper show, because I had just read it in Wired magazine that was going on. So you kind of wonder how much manipulation there is out there, because even our Congress people and every major network TV show said they knew nothing about what the NSA was doing. But, I brought it up on Anderson Cooper's show a year before the story broke, and it's even in one of my books. So,
what do you think I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What do you think their agenda is to not want to talk about it? The government's agenda.
The media? Oh, you're talking about UFOs? Not talk about UFOs?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Well, the whole thing with the government is the U.S. government is after the technology. Absolutely. When you look at the UFO field, basically the United States and the U.K. investigate UFOs through their departments of defense, where South America looks at it through their FAA as if it's an air safety issue. But, we go after to shoot them down. And that's still a standing order since 1952 with Truman. If you can't talk them down, shoot them down. And, you look at China, you look at Japan, they have UFO reporting centers. And so really for us, it's all about getting our hands on the technology.
Also, too, I think, John, you're quoted as saying here, the world is neither good or evil. It's just controlled by money, and that certainly has a lot. That certainly has a lot to do with this in the form of the energy and technology, because as we know today, big corporations pretty much control what goes on on the Hill, on Capitol Hill. I mean, it boggles the mind to think that the bankers and the oil companies have so much influence in a country that's supposed to be, run by the people. It's not. It's run by corporations, just as Dwight Eisenhower predicted it would happen back when he was president. He said to be very leery of the military-industrial complex.
Oh, absolutely. And I think we would really, really be surprised how much of the news is spun and manipulated and written the day before it happens. There's so many things. It's like, you look at NBC and, they edited out the information on Trayvon Martin. You just had their number one guy on television, fabricating a story that he was in a helicopter that got shot down. I watched the stock market real close, and for the last 2 years, I mean, I'll bet my bottom dollar that it's all price fixed for the last 2 years.
What really scares me is how much would they sell us out for the technology that they want? Like abduct as many people as you want, do whatever you want to do to them, experiment them on them all you want for hybrids or whatever it is they're doing. I think that the fact they don't want to acknowledge, anything that's been going on all this time, it's just, it kind of scares me, because thinking, how much would they sell out, their constituents.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like a catch-22. Every radio show I do, I point the finger at the CIA because that's where the cover-up is. But, I also got to say that I think that they do this in some perverted way to protect us, get the technology, keep this thing quiet, and they're really trying to protect America. But, what are you going to do if a species shows up and they make you an offer? And the other choice is if you say no, well, okay, we're going to go to this China country or we're going to go to Russia and make them the same offer. So you got to get in bed with the devil. You really do. Yeah. And in a lot of cases, I think some of this is demonic. I don't think it's extraterrestrial. I think it's flat out demonic when you talk about abductions and some of the other stuff going on. Some of this is ET, ancient alien stuff. But it seems to me that a lot since World War II with the Foo Fighters and a lot of this stuff, I think, is nothing more than end of days demonic stuff.
Of course, now, I don't know. To me, it's kind of hard to pin that down. We did a book called Round Trip to Hell in a Flying Saucer, and we had a number of, serious students of the phenomena debate the issue and to bring up the evidence that there is something very negative about this. And there certainly is. I mean, people who have reported being abducted, they have been literally stripped of everything that they own mentally and physically, and these objects have the ability to change shape as well as the occupants. They often tell us things that turn out to be just contrary to the information that they're giving us. It's really almost impossible to say for sure where this is all leading. Are there forces of good and forces of evil in the universe, and how is this all going to play out? It seems to me that this has been going on for a heck of a long time, and it doesn't really seem to come to any end. It just seems to be continuous, going back through the pages of history. Now, I noticed, John, one of the things you've also written on is the history of UFO as far as art goes. What were you able to find out about that? I know there are several instances of paintings, religious paintings, where UFOs apparently have been a part of the background.
Yeah, well, I give, 5 or 6 different lectures, and I try to, every year, because I run 3 conferences here in Pennsylvania, I try to create a new lecture. I don't want to say the same stuff. So when Ancient Aliens came on, hit the scene 8 years ago, whatever it was, I said, let me look into this UFOs and art and history and try to put together a presentation on that. And, I think most of the stuff I put in that presentation 6 years ago has probably all been shown on Ancient Aliens. But, the history of this just goes back so far. And it makes you laugh when you're doing an interview or an Anderson Cooper show, and it started in Roswell in 1947. No, it didn't. And, in that fact, as far as I'm concerned, the modern UFO era started in 1942 with the Battle of L.A., because if you look into that one, we recovered a craft off the coast of Los Angeles, and we couldn't shoot these things down after firing 1,400 rounds at them. So, it wasn't even Roswell. There were really good cases years before Roswell. But when you look at the ancient history, I mean, some of these paintings, it's, when the people who made these paintings in the 1600s and 1400s, they pretty much painted what they saw. It wasn't, abstract art. They didn't have a Salvatore Dali back then. And, there are paintings that show UFOs that are shining a light down during the birth of Jesus. There's paintings that show the Madonna with a UFO in the background, and there's a man and his dog looking up at it. It's actually a mothership with a couple of UFOs coming out of it. And then you get the rock drawings and petroglyphs that go back thousands of years. I think the ones in Africa are 10,000 years old, and same thing in Australia. So, this planet, I think, has been visited for a very long time. It's a very rich planet. And, I read something in one of Major Kehoe's books where he kind of made a good example. He said if you put your hand out, Earth, and your hand would be the Milky Way galaxy. Earth is located in like the top digit of your ring finger. So if you just put your hand out and look at it, that's where we're located. So it's a launching point for those civilizations that can leave this galaxy and go to another one. And they come here to refuel, retool, restock, do whatever they got to do. And, the other ones that don't leave the galaxy, they come here and it's kind of a science experiment, It may be in all their textbooks. Well, you got to make a visit to Earth and observe that civilization, but you don't interfere. I think they do interfere. There are certain species that do, and that's what's in that one book I just wrote last year, An Alternative History of Mankind.
Well, when you say that they're demonic, so what is that?
Well, there is a portion of this when I look at abductions and even cattle mutilations. And, this group out there, and I don't know if you've talked to any of the people from the Free organization. Have you heard about that? They're looking into abductions. But they got a real good lineup of people, but they kind of lean towards the abductions being kind of left-wing liberals that are here to help us with the environment and free technology and all of that.
Sounds like a good reason for coming here.
Yeah.
Well, if they weren't so frightening, so frightening and probing. Yeah.
Yeah. There's two camps. There's that camp that kind of says, well, they're here for all the reasons to help us, and then there's the other camp that has Dr. David Jacobs, Guy Malone, Nick Redfern, myself, others that say, well, wait a minute, let's take a look at this. They're showing up. They have the ability to communicate, but they don't. They show up at after midnight, and they're in the shadows, and they kind of stun you, take you. So it's a kidnapping. And men and women, it becomes a rape where they're either taking egg or semen, and in some cases the actual act is performed, and then they come back and they take the fetus. I mean, how is that a good thing?
Yeah.
But
the demonic thing, when you say that, because I'm thinking that what people think is demonic is actually these aliens.
Well, there's an overlap. There's absolutely an overlap, and but when I look at some of that stuff going on, and to me, I'm not so certain that some of that is these extraterrestrials. In the demonic sense, I think they would, Satan would want us to believe in extraterrestrials because they're going to come here and help us, and it's almost like you could create a religion out of it, that they're here to give us, all the things we need and superior technology. And what does that do? It pulls you away from religion, which would be what Satan's goal would be.
Some people need to be pulled away from religion.
Yeah,
I mean, as we see on the world stage today,
I mean, could Satan be an alien that was left here, or somebody who, like the subterranean reptilian, could he be one of them? That was left here and just hates us.
It could be a complete, misidentification of angels and demons are actually extraterrestrials. And the one book I wrote actually leans that way, that it's always been them. It's them that we've been seeing, the extraterrestrials. But
and that when we were primitive people, this is what we described it as, something,
Right.
But I still, but I'm still raised a Christian, so I'm still thinking that somewhere, because I have to, because it's just part of me that Jesus is somehow an advocate in all this. So I don't know. I'm still trying to unravel the secrets. I'm trying to get.
Boy, I gotta take the other side of the fence. Of
course you are.
Yeah, I'm not an atheist. I'm a searcher, and I just don't see the connection with the Jesus and Satan and all of
Well,
this.
Jesus was
A lot of it
I think biblical stories, though, try
it's
to-
a religious mythology. You know,
But
I mean,
I
some of
think
it is
that there
true
was-
and some of it isn't, and everybody's got to make up their own, mind. And when you say communicating with us, well, I think that they communicate with us, but they try to communicate with us, or only are able to communicate with us on a different level. We're looking for, like the SETI people are looking for radio signals. Well, maybe they don't like to listen to radio. Maybe they have no interest in that. Maybe they're not on the same frequency as...
As signals go digital in the last 20, 30 years, we're actually sending less and less signals into space. So it's going to get to a point within the next 50 years, maybe 100 years, where we're sending no signals at all to space because we're all going to be 100% digital and everything. So there's not going to be a trace of us in the cosmos. And that's us. Imagine if you're a million years advanced, there would be no signals at all if they're that much more advanced. So SETI has been wasting their time for the last years.
It's just that it's an
Complete
attempt to get a waste of time. A complete object is to get funding from the government or whoever else they can. They totally ignore the UFOs, which are below treetop level, and they're looking out, a million light years in space, where it hardly really matters, to be honest with you. And this is the whole attitude of the so-called academic and scientific community. Ignore what's right under your nose and get the funding. It's all about the
getting
funding.
that money.
It's all about the money.
Yeah. Well, that was my presentation at the MUFON Symposium last July. To go in hand with what you said, just think about your cable TV. Once we put cables, underground, there's no signals being sent out to space. And SETI is the biggest placebo going. It's all about the funding. They can never, ever admit that not one case was real, because then they wouldn't get any funding. And it's SETI. They might. Here, I don't know if you know this, but Frank Drake, who founded SETI, well, back I don't remember the exact year. He was in charge of. He wasn't in charge. He was second in command of Project Ozma, and they put signals out and got a return. Contact was made. So the Air Force immediately shut down Project Ozma, moved it to Arecibo, Puerto Rico, and it's a true story. And they then took Frank Drake, who was on that project, and rewarded him with SETI, which was initially funded by Congress. So Frank Drake was part of a program that made contact, and it was shut down, sent to Arecibo under Air Force control so that none of that information gets out. So SETI is completely phony. But getting back to what I was saying about angels, UFOs and demons, or angels and UFOs, I read a book recently by Nick Redfern, and I've been having a lot of paranormal type stuff happen in my house. It's happened for quite a while, so I've got interest, in that. And then the first book I wrote, first two were, end time prophecy books. So I have Nick Redfern come and speak at my Pittsburgh conference in last November, just a few months ago. So I picked up his book called Final Events. And what an interesting book. It's based on information given to the Nebraska MUFON State Director, who is I think he's a pastor. And it talks about a branch of the CIA called the Collins Elite. Have you ever heard about that?
Oh, yeah. Well, we've interviewed Nick on the subject, and I've written it up in a couple of my books, too. Yeah, it's, but again, when you say the military and the government, there seem to be a lot of fractions in there, too, where some people believe that they're very negative and other people think that they've come here for, sweetness and light purposes. So even among the military, that's not an official policy. That's where people have their own specific interest in it, and that's the path that they decided to take, because certainly a lot of people in the government and the military would be part of this Christian background and Christian movement.
Yeah, and I thought it made a lot of sense at how they're trying to, control these demonic powers. I don't agree with the concept that there are no UFOs and it's all demonic. That was kind of the the content in the book, but some of it made sense that there would be a branch of the CIA that would be looking into this. But my personal belief is that some of this is definitely, when you look at these abductions and some of the horrible things that happen, they make a point that even the cattle mutilations, that those are being done as almost sacrificial ritual, is what they're doing with the cattle to satisfy these demonic entities. I don't know. So on the way I look at it, because I've had paranormal stuff happen, over the past 25 years.
Well, what sort of paranormal things?
Well, it started out years ago when I moved to Oklahoma. Just some voices, heavy footsteps. From there, we moved to New Jersey, and that house was like the Amityville Horror. It was incredible. Black shadows moving across the ceiling. Everybody in the house saw it. Family members, a dark cloud moving. People saying they hear voices and a baby crying, and my son would say he'd lay down at night, and in the wall a voice would say, "I'm going to get you." He actually saw. He was brushing his teeth, and he saw this creature walk across the door. Both him and his cat saw it, and they both turned and looked, and it was just a very creepy house. So then from there I moved here, and it seems to follow me, because it doesn't follow my kids, thank God. But, and the same thing, tapping on the walls and different things have happened here, but it seemed to have escalated the last couple of years. And one night we went to, I was on the board of juvenile diabetes, so we came home from the gala, and we went to bed. So my daughter, my son, and his fiance in another room, and then myself in my room. And my daughter comes bursting into my room at 3 a.m. She says, "Dad, you're not going to believe what happened." I went downstairs to get a bottle of water, and you didn't have any in the refrigerator, so I went to the basement refrigerator, and she said something was standing behind me. She said I could feel it. All the hair on my neck went up. She says I went upstairs, I laid down in bed, and this thing laid on top of me. And she said it went into my body. I couldn't move. It was painful. And she said I could hear all these voices in my head, and it pulls out of me. She said it was the most painful thing. And then she says it happens again. So she says this time she can move her eyes, and in the mirror she sees like the shadow man standing in the doorway. And in her head she hears it's like a room full of people. And she says she hears this shadow man say to whatever's in her, "When you're done with her, I want to try out the other two," meaning my son and his fiance. Now, the way she worded it, I know she didn't make that up. That was just, so that happened. Then there's been other things that have happened with loud bangs, and it really came to a head recently, and that's why I'm looking at more of the demonic side. Is in June, I'm here in the house, I go upstairs, and there's this horrible smell coming out of the bathroom. I thought, I have a 108-pound Doberman. I thought he went in there and did his business. Oh. But,
That's a thought.
Yeah, well, that's what it initially smelled like. And then I'm smelling it. I said, this smells like rotting flesh, And it was horrible. So I put the fan on. I go downstairs, and I'm watching the baseball game. My dog comes over to me, and he always either has this thing where he lays across my lap. So all of a sudden on the wall, inside the house, boom, it's the loudest bang you can imagine. There's a picture on the wall. It kind of flips up like an inch off the wall. I have these two Indian headdresses on the sides. They kind of blow to the side. So then from there, I go upstairs when the baseball game's over. I check that bathroom, it still smells. Now, below it is a bathroom, and below that is another bathroom on the 3 floors of my house. Only that bathroom smells upstairs, right? So I turn the fan off. So I go into my bedroom. My dog all of a sudden gets up, walks down the hallway. He looks up the attic stairs and goes absolutely berserk, barking, growling. I mean, when a dog sees something. So, I go and look. I don't see anything, but I still smell the smell. So then I go in my bedroom. My dog sleeps right at the foot of the bed, there's a chair there, so he claims that. So I put the news on so I could still see the dog's head, and again, there's this loud bang inside my bed, and both me and the dog, our heads turn and we look at it. Same thing as downstairs during the baseball game when it hit the wall and the picture kind of flipped up. So that kind of scared me because my daughter saw that shadow person and it pulled out of her, and so that happened to the kids. And then what happened? It was April of 2014.
You're saying the dog with the cellar steps. I mean, with the attic steps.
Oh, okay. So the dog was barking viciously, at the attic. And then what happened was we go to bed, and again there's this big loud bang against my wall, and both the dog heard it because his head turned, my head turned. So both times that the big bang happened, we both heard it. So it's not something that's psychological because the dog heard it also. Mm-hmm. And what happened just right before that, also a couple of months earlier, I have this home theater, so I have this projector on the ceiling, and I'm talking to my son and his fiance, and we see this, I don't know what it was, the light of the projector, we see this thing snake across the ceiling, some sort of a spirit, and it looked almost like a snake, the way it moved across the ceiling. And my son says to me, "What is that?" I said, "I have no idea what that was." But so these things have happened, and it really concerned me. So I'm saying to myself, the things that happened to me, is it demonic? Is it extraterrestrial? I mean, one night I woke up and I see this person standing down the hallway, and I'm awake. I mean, the attic light seems to be on, so the stairs are backlit. There's this like 6.5, 7 foot tall person standing there. It looked like the creatures in District 9. They had almost no waist, really long arms, and like a helmet on, So I'm looking at it, and I'm awake. I crawl to the foot of the bed. So now it's like 10, 15 seconds. I see this guy standing there. So I kind of jump up, put the light on, and he's gone. And the backlight is off also from the attic, So I don't know what that was. So I'm trying to...
Did you start having these experiences when you started to investigate the UFOs?
Exactly what I was going to ask.
Mm-hmm.
No, because they started in 1989 when I moved to Oklahoma, and it was almost like the Poltergeist movie. I read an article that they built. I had a brand new house, and the subdivision next to us, they found Indian, burial ground. They had already built homes there, but it started in Oklahoma. But when I got to New Jersey, and it's still, I was not involved in UFOs. I was, not a member of MUFON, had no interest in it. So in my mind, that stuff was all spirit world, But then, also when you look at UFOs, I joined MUFON in 98. In 99, I went to my first MUFON symposium. So I come home and I'm at the symposium. I meet this woman there. I saw her in the audience. I made sure that I kind of went over to her at lunchtime and I'm speaking to her. And a very strange looking person, very pale, gray bloodshot eyes, very just unusual looking person. And it's funny, we had lunch, went back to the symposium, she was gone, So I personally, I think she might have been a hybrid, So I get home from the symposium, it was 4th of July weekend, and all of a sudden, for that whole week, I have the weirdest dreams. And, again, I just joined MUFON. I didn't know a lot about UFOs. I have out-of-body experience. I could see the top of my house and my car in the driveway. I'm waking up like every hour. I can't sleep, like something is in the room with me. I one time I woke up, I swung my fist at the air, I hit the headboard, I almost broke my wrist. I'm having these dreams of this hairy creature standing next to the bed. Another dream is this kid. He looks like he's about 10 years old, but he's got these big Popeye forearms with the bone of the elbow really sticks out. no hair. And my dog, I have my Doberman. I've always had Dobermans. My Doberman is kind of floating in the air, and he's poking him in the ribs. And I keep yelling at the kid, "Stop poking my dog!" But he keeps poking him. So it was like weird. What was that? I don't know if that was an abduction. My girlfriend actually went to the website and looked up what happened in the area that night, and the night that I got home in the out-of-body experience. And she says to me, "John, there was a UFO sighting in State College. There was another one in Morgantown, West Virginia. Your house is in direct line of those two cases that happened that night that I got home." So, I don't know. So I don't know if that stuff is an abduction. I don't know if this stuff is demonic. But I met this woman in August, and I mean, I don't know how many women that can recite the exorcism rites. But I just kind of
Well, I do.
Maybe you.
Yeah, you actually do.
Oh, yeah,
you actually do.
That's kind of most of my friends, actually.
Yeah.
Hey, but John, I was just thinking. I did a book a couple of years ago called UFO Terrorists: Curse of the Men in Black. In a lot of the early cases of the Men in Black, showing up to silence UFO witnesses, we had a lot of instances of this, like entities appearing in houses and warning people and driving individuals off the road, and then the cars would disappear. Even Albert K. Bender, who was headed one of the first UFO groups, the Bureau, put out a magazine called Space, a newsletter. Yeah. He reported that these MIB, these tall, lanky beings dressed in black with the sunglasses and black hats over their head and so forth, came into his home and actually warned him about discussing the UFO topic. He was told that he had come too close to the explanation for UFOs, as if there's only one, right? And that he should stop talking about it. And we had a lot of cases where people were being molested, just like you described. And there was one instance where a Australian researcher, John Stewart, reported that he was almost thrown down an escalator in a large department store by an invisible being. So this has happened to a lot of people. In fact, even in my family, my sister had some of the same things that you described, with the voices and sounds coming from the basement and from an abandoned well, and the children seeing some sort of being dressed in coveralls in the back area of the house, which was a wooded area.
And the house where I was? In the house where I was?
No. This was actually down the road, maybe a couple of miles. But it did seem to follow them around. I mean, my sister always seemed to be connected to this. In fact, it seemed to have run in the family. My grandfather on my father's side of the family actually had an encounter with a headless horseman, and It wasn't Halloween or anything like that. But he would never talk about it because he was a good Baptist, and he thought it was demonic. But then, on the other hand, at the age of 3, my life might have been saved by a guardian angel. We were driving along a back mountainous road on the way to Kentucky. That's where my aunt and uncle lived, my father's brother. And it was getting very late, and it was getting very overcast. It was getting foggy, actually. And my mother insisted that my father immediately stop at the side of the road, because she was afraid of, oncoming traffic and so forth, not being able to see it. And my father said, no. It was only 100 miles or so to go, and he was getting tired, and he just wanted to drive on, not park on the road. Anyway, my mother, being the forceful lady that she was, my father stopped, and they parked. Well, when the sun rose in the morning and the fog broke, it turned out that we were just on the edge of a cliff, and I would have been dead meat for the buzzards down in the ravine if it wasn't for something telling my mother to have my dad stop the car immediately. So, as we go through life, we find that there is negative and there is positive throughout us in the universe, and some call them demons and some call them spirits, and some are just not decided what they are. But a lot of people have reported these experiences. I know I've often gone out and interviewed people who have had close encounters and then gotten back in touch with them later on, and they will have had a series of poltergeist phenomena. It's like the UFOs were seen outdoors, but all these strange things would start suddenly to come into their home.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing topic that I had no interest in really prior to 40 years old. So
you called her the UFOs?
None of this, actually. I was kind of like a Comic-Con. I collected the horror magazines, Famous Monsters of Filmland, that type of stuff, and I seemed to got drawn into this. I really had no. And most of the people in this, like you talk to any MUFON state director, they'll tell you at 10 years old they were reading every UFO
surely.
magazine,
Absolutely.
watching. I had no interest in really in any of that. I collected some comic books and stuff, but but I kind of got pulled into it. And when you talk to somebody who's never had any of this happen, no spiritual stuff, no poltergeist stuff, no UFO interest, they look at you like you're nuts. They actually do. It's amazing how some people seem to be open to this and have experiences. Others, nothing at all.
Hey, I notice here that you own a Mexican restaurant called Flying Salsa.
Well, that was something I tried. I don't have it, or it's not up, let's say, now. But I thought that was such a cool idea to have a Mexican restaurant called Flying Salsa, out of this world Mexican food. So, what we end up doing now is at our conferences, we got this big banner that says that, and where we serve the food for lunch and stuff. It wasn't like copywriting, like writing a book. You can't copyright that name. You have like 18 months to put a restaurant in place, and then that's the end of that. But I just thought it was a cool cool name.
We did have another fellow. I remember years ago. He's since deceased, Miguel, who had a Mexican restaurant in Reno. And he had UFO pictures and all over the place. And he once tried to put together a UFO conference and got me to be the MC. He picked the local rodeo venue, which was a place that seated like 6,000 people, kind of indoors and outdoors. Well, the pigeons were flying overhead, and the rafters was falling down on the speakers, which I guess the number of people in attendance were maybe about 150 or so. And he tried to fill a giant UFO balloon with helium, and it never quite got off the ground. We had a lot of good speakers, but the Cow Palace was just not the place to have a UFO conference. I'm afraid, it just didn't work. And there have been some strange UFO conferences over the years. Now, how did your conference turn out this year?
Oh, good. It's funny. Ours have gotten better every year. So this will be our 8th year of doing them in Pennsylvania. We do Erie, Pennsylvania, which is coming up in May. And then October is Philly, and then November is Pittsburgh. And, the crowds get a little bigger each time. But, even when I say that, a good crowd for us is 300,
Yeah. I did Pittsburgh. I did I can't say I was the originator of UFO conferences and shows, because actually the first one was held in a hotel in Los Angeles in 1952. I believe Max Miller was the organizer. Now, Max Miller put out a little magazine during the 50s called Saucers. It was actually one of the more professional printed of zines in those days. Anyway, he had a conference, and I guess it had about 1,000 people. And over the years, there's been big conferences and small conferences. The largest one that I was affiliated with was the one that Jim Moseley put together in 1967 at the Hotel Commodore in New York. It was the largest indoor conference. It attracted about 12,000 people over the course of the weekend, and there's never been anything like that again, at least in a inside venue. But I did try Pittsburgh, and we were on AM Pittsburgh with a different speaker every day of the week just before the conference. And I think we had the show at the Y, and we had 150 people or so.
You think there's less interest now?
We promoted it. Oh, this was 25 years ago. We promoted it pretty heavily, but the public just then wasn't I think that into it yet. It's sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but at least you have a pretty strong base, being that there probably are quite a few MUFON members in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, I've got about 170 MUFON members in PA, but it's funny. I said in one of my books or my lectures that the CIA has been behind this whole clamping down on ufology, and you look at the best UFO conferences now, I don't care which one it is, they really don't get more than about 450 people per day to show up. But yet the San Diego Comic-Con gets 200,000 people. So
amazing.
Can you imagine if the CIA had targeted comic books in the 1950s
well, I think they
UFOs?
did, or somebody did, right? Didn't they try to outlaw comic books there for a while?
Yeah, yeah.
Had a censor board or something. That only made it more popular, I think, to a large degree.
But they definitely been successful with trying to kill UFOs. That's for sure.
But we talked about this on Skywatchers on one of Angel's other programs a couple of weeks ago. There is very little crossover, perhaps none, between comic the book people and horror people and UFOs.
Well,
I'm one of them.
I think it's saying more that people would rather go to Comic-Con and look at all these things for entertainment than actually delve into anything real.
Well, yeah, but understand also that a lot of the stuff that we see in comic books, for example, has a lot of lore in it. That's tied with ufology, tied with conspiracies, tied with paranormal. You can look at Captain America, for example, and it's tied in with aliens and all kinds of stuff. I mean, that's all over the comic book universe. So I mean, they draw a lot of their mythology from a lot of the older stories.
Well. I mean, look at the movie Men in Black. It was based on a comic book with the same title. When actually Albert K. Bender and John Keel is where they got most of their information for, but they fictionalized it and watered it down. And
fictionalized is the word, though. Comics.
It made it silly. I mean, that's what I would say. Let's try to make
it's a comedy.
Silly.
Yeah.
But
not
just
funny.
that. I mean, a lot of the movies. At least the current crop of movies like Paul and the one with Adam Sandler.
He had an alien movie, Adam Sandler?
I think it's Adam Sandler. The Neighborhood Watch.
Yeah, that was the Neighborhood
Watch.
Watch.
Yeah, that's right, the Watch.
Yeah, let's just make it silly, and people will have a good laugh at it.
Yeah, but it's funny. When I do, they'll ask me in Pennsylvania to be a speaker and have a table at a horror con, and there is no interest. Those people have no interest in UFOs. I'll have all my books there and my lecture DVDs and stuff, and I'm lucky I sell 1 or 2 books the whole weekend.
Absolutely. I had there's a fellow out in Tucson who has a weekly public access show, and it's on UFOs. But he owns a comic book store and a place that sells, toy figurines and models and things like that, And I tried to get him to carry my books, and he said no, because he would lose his comic book customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
If he ever bought in any UFO literature and books and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it goes, because the comic book and the science fiction people, I hate to say this, but they are ignorant of the facts, and also too they are too easily swayed by what they see as the icons and the giants in the field. It's like magicians like Houdini and the unamazing Randy who tell everybody, well, there's nothing to this at all. They've never investigated this. I shared an office space with the amazing Randy back in the 60s and 70s. He had he had a radio show. He took over for Long John, and he had guests on about the subject, but he had no interest in anything except entertainment and getting his name in print. So if he could say, there's no UFOs, or Uri Geller is making this all up and so forth, to get attention, and that's what he's done, and that's what all these skeptics have done. They've never really to bother investigating anything. I remember years and years ago, John Fuller, who wrote Incident at Exeter and The Interrupted Journey about Betty and Barney Hill, was on, maybe it was Meet the Press or something. It was a very highbrow show, like on Sunday morning, because this was when there was a huge amount of UFO activity. And he was on with Donald Menzel. and they were talking about UFOs for a half an hour and this, that, and the other thing. And Donald Menzel didn't even know where Exeter was. I mean, like, you get these people on there, and they don't do the most minimal amount of research, and of course they're so hostile that the witnesses won't even talk to them. There's one thing. Hey, I can be skeptical about what you're saying, John, and I don't agree with everything that the first guest we had on, Laurie, have to say, but I don't have to be hostile about it. I mean, and I don't have to call. Name calling is a part of what they do. That's the only thing that they can say. If they've got nothing else to say, they can say you're fat or whatever it is. It's just it's like an Abbott and Costello routine, or maybe more like Laurel and Hardy or something like that. Yuck, 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 yuck.
Yeah, well, when I was on that Anderson Cooper show and Joe Nickel was on there, he did the same thing. We had 3 witnesses there, and 2 were young girls, like 22 years old, and of course he's asking them, were you doing drugs? And I think what you were doing, you were drinking or doing drugs, and then you saw something, and they try to just apply logic, and they never ever look into the cases, and that's exactly what you run into with skeptics.
So now, have you? I remember hearing that there were quite a few Bigfoot sightings in Pennsylvania that might have been associated with UFOs. Have you ever had people call you about reports of these giant, hairy, smelly creatures?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a funny thing. Like even like we say, the horror stuff in UFOs. Well, the Bigfoot people don't like the UFO people, and the UFO people don't like the ghost people, and the ghost people don't like the Bigfoot people. It's an amazing thing to watch. But yeah, we have had cases like that, and that's kind of like one of the debates that comes up: or is Bigfoot actually an extraterrestrial creature, or are there different types of Bigfoot? One being a primate that's not discovered, and one being an extraterrestrial. We had a case here in Pennsylvania. Back actually in 1973 with Stan Gordon. It was in Uniontown, PA.
Oh, yeah, he's a great researcher. I mean, he's really uncovered a lot of information on sightings like this.
Yeah, and, he lives about 2 miles from me, which is a coincidence. He was the MUFON state director in PA for about 15 years, and I've had it for almost 10 now, but we live right in the same town. But in that case, there was a farmer and his son, and they see this Bigfoot on their property, but they also see a UFO. So they fire at the Bigfoot, and they said, they had a rifle. I know I hit it, is what they said. I hit that thing. And it just kind of like, it walked away and then kind of like disappeared. But they have this UFO hovering there, and then the UFO takes off. So Stan Gordon and his guys and the state police go up there, and where the UFO was is a round spot that's still glowing at night. And Stan said one of his investigators walked into the center of it, and he collapsed, and he actually started howling and kind of like barking like a dog. They had to grab him and pull him out of that area.
Who was this that did that?
One of the investigators.
One of the investigators. Oh, okay.
With Stan Gordon. Yeah, it was one of Stan Gordon's guys.
Yep.
But that's one of the better ones. I mean, Stan he's really into the Bigfoot stuff.
Yes.
He's had cases where the Bigfoots come up to like a bathroom window, a bedroom window, and kind of looked in, and the people have seen it, and it has that sulfur type smell to it and stuff. But this area, it's kind of weird here in Western PA. This area has like one of the most Bigfoot sightings, UFO sightings. Popular Mechanics actually did an article in 2009 about counties that have the most UFO sightings in counties that don't have a major city in it, like Los Angeles County. And the number one county was Westmoreland County, which is 30 miles outside of Pittsburgh. We get the most UFO cases in the country for a county that doesn't have a major city in it.
Well, I was always skeptical about the connection between Bigfoot and UFOs. I mean, I knew Ivan T. Sanderson, who, of course, was the first investigator of the Bigfoot. He used to be on NBC. He was an animal curator, and had the credentials and so forth. And he did a really big, thick book, probably the first one on the abominable snowman. but I didn't see any real connection until I actually went and investigated a case in Athens, Ohio. There was a little item in the newspaper, in the New York Post, about someone who had seen an object land in the field. There it had left some indentions in the ground, and I just happened to be going to Ohio on some business, so I figured, well, let me go interview the people who had seen this object back of their house in the cornfield. Well, it wasn't really a cornfield. It was a small patch of corn, let's say. But I decided, let me go out after I'd done my investigation there and talk to some of the neighbors to see if they had seen any unusual things in the sky. Well, there were a few reports of UFOs, but people started telling me about their experiences with these creatures. One woman said that there were big footprints behind her air conditioner, when they where the footprints had been left in the ground, under the muddy soil caused by the dripping of the water and so forth. And there were other people who said that the Bigfoot was banging on the side of their house, and it all became intertwined. And so I don't know. I said after that, well, there must be some connection with it, and then I started doing my own investigation and hearing people describe similar, situations and sightings.
Yeah, well, this area is huge for hunters, deer hunter, just like the movie, deer hunting, and so when you talk about Bigfoot here, you got a lot of these guys come out and say they've seen stuff, they've heard stuff in the woods, things that didn't sound right to them, and so actually when you do the Bigfoot conference in this area, it draws a bigger crowd than the UFO conference does. So, every now and then I try to have a Bigfoot speaker or ghost speaker at my UFO conferences just to try to bring the other crowd in also.
So, do you think that these beings these Bigfoot are being controlled by somebody on board the ship, or are they? I don't think that they would be piloting them necessarily. Are they coming through some window area from some other dimension?
Well, I'm not a big believer that the Bigfoot is that related to UFOs. I do have one of my chief investigator, who's also the West Virginia State Director, Fred Saluga. He's into Bigfoot and UFOs, and he's convinced that there is a connection there. I kind of think Bigfoot's probably, just a primate that hasn't been discovered. The funny thing is, though, when you look at all of this stuff, you got to be able to explain everything, and I kind of keep saying to myself, I got to come up with the string theory of everything unexplained. The ghostly stuff, the creatures that are unexplained, UFOs, etc. And, the best explanation that I can come up with is that it's interdimensional, which would explain, how they just kind of appear, they disappear. It takes care of all the legends. A lot of UFOs even kind of just blink out, they disappear. So if it's interdimensional, that kind of explains how maybe a lot of this where it comes from.
Last week we had on Ted Phillips, who of course was Dr. Hynek's associate for many, many years. And of course he started out back in the 1960s investigating the Socorro UFO landing there. And he became convinced in the last few years by investigating this incidences in Marley Woods, where these objects appear and disappear, and they range in size from a few feet across to 20 feet in diameter, and now they're starting to get into the homes of the people there. So he started out believing that UFOs were all extraterrestrial in origin, and now definitely believes it's paranormal in nature.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. MUFON's stance, because it's a scientific organization, has been pretty much nuts and bolts. They fly here from another, solar system, etc. And, because they want to investigate the scientific aspect of it, and that's, what they kind of lean towards. When you start talking about the paranormal and interdimensional and that type of stuff, most of the MUFON people start to back away.
Yes.
But, because I've had all the paranormal stuff happen, I've never seen a UFO, but that's why I kind of say, interdimensional, it kind of explains a lot of it. Even if you're religious, like I said, where I think some of this is demonic, well, what would that be? There's a dimension, which is heaven. There's a dimension, which is hell. that Satan rules, then there's these other dimensions with these creatures and other beings, and they come through. So for me, the string theory of everything is interdimensional.
Now, here's a little bit of something I picked up. Kenneth Arnold is often credited as being the individual who, I guess, described UFOs as skipping over water like a saucer. So that's how the name Flying Saucer came about. Now, his
not really.
Well, okay. Oh, well, now you okay, but let's not get off track. Okay, we can go back.
Well, let him correct you. Go ahead, John.
Yeah,
what was the first description?
Yeah, the only reason I say that is, and you can say what you're going to say.
Yes.
Is okay. Everybody credits Kenneth Arnold with saying flying saucers as being the originator of that term, but he wasn't. It was used in a Dallas newspaper in like 1879. It's actually in my book, An Alternative History of Mankind. Nobody knows that fact, but I could actually tell you the exact date and who the guy was, but it originally showed up about 70 years before Kenneth Arnold. But again, say what you're going to say.
Okay. Anyway, so Kenneth Arnold is often credited as being the start, his sighting being the start of the modern UFO era, although we know it goes back long before then. And he saw these 9 kind of heel-shaped objects. They weren't actually discs at all, flying just above the cloud layer in Mount Rainier in Washington State. Actually, Yakima was the area that he was flying over, which is known for its UFO activity. There is an Indian reservation there, and they actually had for many years, I don't know if it's still there or not, UFO Sky Watchtower, where they would see these weird lights coming up from far below, So he had these sightings, and he's often credited for being the daddy of the UFO phenomena as we know it, but he didn't really believe that UFOs were extraterrestrial. In fact, there have been a couple of interviews with his, I think, daughter and his granddaughter on podcast, and he believed that they were interdimensional and perhaps maybe negative in origin. He thought that they were some sort of craft that took the souls of the dead over to the other side. And he had a case where he talked about a rocking chair in his living room that would move back and forth, and there was no one seated in it. He had some things that were happening with weird lights in the trees outside of his home. But one of the weird things, and I think one of the ways that these beings can converse with us is that there obviously is some sort of a language barrier, but I think that there is a relationship between coincidence and synchronicity. Now, a number of UFO investigators have passed away on the same day that Kenneth Arnold had his UFO sighting, June 24th. Well, isn't it very interesting that they passed away on that date, and he believed that the UFOs that he saw were containers that carried the spirits of the deceased over to the other side? I don't know. I just think it's a kind of a weird coincidence. It's really just kind of too eerie for me.
Yeah. He also did an interview in early mid-50s, and he also said he came to the conclusion that he thought that those craft were like almost living creatures, that they had skin on them, and didn't think that they were actually metallic. So,
right.
I mean, who knows? I mean, and then you talk about taking the souls again. Then, see, I keep reverting back to the religious side because I believe in Jesus, and I do think that there is pure evil out there and demons, and maybe that's part of it too, to steal our souls.
What do they do with them?
They eat them.
Like the movie Phantasm. You guys ever seen the movie Phantasm?
Yeah, like Phantasm.
Big tall white guy just put in a container.
For the left-wing liberals,
that would be me.
Yeah, they're here to serve. They're here to serve man.
Literally on a dish.
Cookbook. Yeah, cookbook.
So, John, what's happening in Pennsylvania now? Is there anything going on?
Well, we get, it's funny, since we had that UFO wave in 2008, like I said, we were getting about 95, 97 cases. Since 2008, we have gotten a steady 320 325 to 350 cases a year. So the activity's gone up to where we get 6 and sometimes 7 cases a week. One of my guys, he's an attorney, and he did a study, looked at 2,000 cases of orange orbs. Not the small ball lightning, the large ones that are seen in the sky. And he wrote a book, and he actually came to the conclusion there are 4 bases. They show up at like 8:30 at night. They leave about 10:30 at night. And he tracked the 2,000 reports, and he says there's a base off of Los Angeles, and I think we all have heard about that, Catalina Island. There's a base in Lake Erie, which is where a lot of my cases and Ohio's UFO sightings come out of Lake Erie. And then he says there's 2 other bases, one off of Miami, and then one.
That's where I'm at, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, okay. And then one off of the Gulf side. So he did a lot of analysis on that. I got some really good people in my group here. I got 30 investigators, almost 170 members. But like I said, we get almost a case a day. But I've got 5 other states. I'm one of the few, or maybe even the only multi-state director for MUFON. I've got 6 states. So I've got Delaware, and then I have 4 New England states. And when I get cases out of Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine in particular, I'm telling you, those are paranormal. I get the weirdest cases out of the New England area.
One of the best cases that I remember from years ago, do you know about a case in Bangor, Maine, where somebody actually shot at a UFO and heard the bullet ricochet?
Oh, no, I'm not familiar with that one. But.
See, I go way back.
Yeah. I mean, I had a case, this woman called me, and I think she was in New Hampshire, and she goes, John, I live on a farm, and she says, it's like nobody else, it's pitch black. She says, she'll see like a laser light being pointed through her windows. I said, well, maybe that's just kids messing with you and stuff, And she goes, no, there's something out there. She says, all of a sudden the house will kind of like light up, from above. There's a light shining on her house. And she says she called her boyfriend, and she says, I'm watching out the window. I see my boyfriend come to the gate. He gets out to open the gate. It's kind of like a ranch type thing, And she says, I see this thing kneeling down at the other end of the gate. It stands up. It's got to be like 7 feet tall. And she says it runs through like the cornfield. And she says, I can see it running at about 30 miles an hour and the path it's making through the cornfield. I mean, I get these phone calls at like 1 in the morning like that. But the stuff that comes out of the New England area is the creepiest stuff.
What else? What else you got?
Well, there's just a lot of that type of stuff. One guy called me and he said that, he keeps having these recurring, like, out-of-body experiences. And again, he was up in that New England area where he's in a field and there's a woman there. And as he gets closer and closer to her, then she turns into something else. It's like in Pennsylvania, I get like normal UFO cases. I get very few of the Bigfoots, and I don't think I ever get any that I would say, well, this is, this sounds like paranormal stuff to me. But the New England, there's something about New England that's just very creepy up there.
Are you in touch with like any of the ghost hunters or paranormal researchers? I mean, sharing information at all?
I'm friends with all of them. I try to stay neutral, and like I said, I try to invite the Bigfoot Society. I go to their conferences. I was a member of the Pennsylvania Bigfoot, but they don't want to come to the UFO conference. The paranormal people, I actually, I tried starting out with that before I joined MUFON.
Yes.
So I stay open to all of that, mainly because I've had the paranormal experiences, and I have those speakers come to our conferences. But I wouldn't say that we're, in close contact sharing information. Probably half of my investigators, what I started doing in PA was recruiting people from the paranormal, the ghost hunting, not too many Bigfoot people, a couple of them, because they know how to investigate, and they're kind of open-minded, and they've actually been very good investigators for me. So when we have something like that, I'll turn it over to them, and then they're the ones that are communicating back to these other groups. It's not me.
Are there any kind of patterns that are emerging?
We were having the orange orbs, a lot of those recently. Back in 2008, it was the triangular craft. which, now I kind of look at the wave over 2008 that happened over PA, and I can't help but wonder if it wasn't the TR-3B, that maybe it was a military craft, the triangular craft with the light on each end, 3 lights.
That's sprinkled into the tree?
Well, I don't know why they would be sprinkling, probes into a tree, but the description kind of fit the TR-3B.
Is it probes or waste?
No, it was like a probe. They were like these metallic sprinkles that dropped into the tree, and they were glittering. They were lit up, and then they kind of got pulled back up into the craft like with a magnet. Just sucked them right back up.
Now, we used to we had test tubes of stuff that was pretty similar to that. If I remember, on one side was slightly pink. Was that any of the substance that you saw? Did you see it, the substance?
No, I didn't see anything on the leaves, but the leaves were starting. This is May, June, July, and the leaves were turning brown, and they were lacerated like a laser or something had burned the leaves. So, it was weird. The leaves were producing an enzyme called anthocyanin, which is a natural occurring enzyme when it's subject to high heat or radiation. And it was only that tree. I mean, the tree next to it didn't have that. The tree in the front of the house didn't have it.
So why would the military be so low over a house?
I don't know. That one that doesn't really fit the military, but the description of the triangular craft, which is the TR-3B, fit a lot of the sightings that we had over that summer. But, we just had a case in Delaware, because I have Delaware also, and it's these orbs up in the sky, and people will say that they're Chinese lanterns, but there was like 9 of them, and they filmed them. And then all of a sudden, one at a time, they started taking off. And if they were Chinese lanterns, they would move together. But 8 of them leave. 1 of them is still hovering there, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. It ejects something on fire, and then it takes off. It actually takes off in the opposite direction from the other 8. But this burning piece of something comes down, and this guy recovers it. So he calls us, and we get a portion of it. And it looks like insulation. And it's too big to be, it's definitely insulation, but it couldn't be from a Chinese lantern because you couldn't lift it. It was too big of a piece. It was like 12, 14 inches long and 2 inches thick. You couldn't lift that with a Chinese lantern. So we take it and we send a piece of it to Phyllis Budinger in Ohio, Frontier Labs, and she does the analysis. And she says, John, this is insulation, but it's coated with a chemical for waterproofing. And she said, we just invented this type of insulation about 18 months ago. So she says, she was surprised that, if it was used in a military craft, it would be kind of quick that, because it was just invented. So I don't know what we recovered. It was something from a UFO, whether it was a military craft or a real UFO, but we have a piece of a UFO that we analyzed, and we're going to actually talk about that at the May.
Why would they eject?
It was on fire, and what Phyllis said is she believes it was used in an energy storage area. There must have been a fire in there, and it kind of like ejected it, or they threw it out of the craft, and then they were able to, move on their way. But, that was her analysis, that there was a fire and they ejected out the insulation that was on fire.
Also, too, one of the first cases, Maury Island, back in Washington State, which was even before Kenneth Arnold sighting by a few days, involved substances like molten metals that were dropped from the sky that damaged the boat and killed the dog of the owner. In fact, we have to have Ken Thomas on some night to discuss that, and it ties in actually with the assassination of JFK.
Yeah,
anyway,
right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are winding down the evening here, and John, give us a little bit of information where listeners can get in touch with you. Tell us your books. Are they available on Amazon.com? And what's your website? And when is the new Hangar 1 going to be on? And what's the first episode about?
Okay. Hangar 1 will air April 3rd. It was actually supposed to start last night, but then they postponed it to April 3rd. So season 2 is going to start April 3rd. I don't know the order of the shows, but there's 12 episodes this year. And 18 members in the cast. So there were 8 last year and 8 episodes. So we have a bigger cast and 4 more episodes. As far as myself goes, all my books and lectures and DVDs are on my website, johnventre.com. That's VENTRE, johnventre.com. And our conferences are on our website, MUFONPA.com. We do 3 conferences. We have Erie in May, we have Philly in October, and Pittsburgh in November. So if you're anywhere on the East Coast, Northeast, Midwest, we get people flying in from Canada, Texas, Florida.
Well, you put on a very good conference. And Carla, speaking of Erie, Carla's salon used to be. Notice I didn't say saloon. Her salon used to be on Erie Street. But where are you located now? In case anybody wants to go over to get clipped, get their hair done. And she's in Jersey City. That's why we say it's the cutting edge of the paranormal.
Yes, I am. 353 2nd Street, Jersey City, downtown New Jersey. Very groovy. BalanceSalonJC.com.
Yeah, you're not too far from us if you want to swing by in October and come to the Philly conference. We do it in Bucks County. You can just go straight across 78 and you'll make your way into us.
I have a friend in Melbourne, too.
Yeah. Yeah, you guys should come. You're not that far away.
Absolutely. Well, now we're back in the full gear. Maybe we can bring down our. I also do I have a channel on YouTube. It's Mr. UFO's Secret Files, and we've got some very good interviews up there. I take my camera with me and I travel around, and it's for fun and not necessarily for profit. It's totally unedited and unorganized, but it's some great stuff up there. Anyway. Anyone who wants to get in touch with me, my email address is mrufo8@hotmail.com. And if you want to learn all about our exciting books, we have some 200 titles by many, many authors in the field, I suggest you just go to Amazon.com and type in Timothy Beckley, and all these great books will pop up in front of your eye and keep me motivated by ordering something. And so we've rock and rolled, and I want to say good night to our listeners out there, and see you next week, same time, same host. Tell your friends, go to the archive, pass it along, and remember, we're unraveling the secrets together. Good night, all.
It's been